better. Okay, by show of hands, how many of you ever attended a performance of Drury Lane's Music Hall? By show of hands. Okay, now for those of you who have, hey, thank you. For those of you who haven't, you're missing a girl husband in bed with another woman. Well, with a strength fueled by rage, she tears him out of the bed, throws him out the window of their 18th-story apartment. Well, now she's before the judge. And the judge asks, he says, do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? She says, yes, Your Honor, I do. I thought that if at 92 he could still perform, he could also fly. Well, I didn't think I'd tell Bruner. Fellow walks into a doctor's office and says, I need to see the doctor. Well, the receptionist takes his name, his health card number, all the usual stuff. Says, sit down, somebody will be with you in a few minutes. A few minutes, all right. 45 minutes later, the nurse comes out, says, follow me. Takes him into the back, says, puts him in one of these little examination rooms and says, take off all your clothes, the doctor will be here shortly. Shortly, all right. 45 minutes later, in comes the doctor, says, well, my good man, what have you got? He said, shingles. He said, shingles, where? He said, outside on the truck. Where do you want them? Very good. A couple was out driving one day and they get into a terrible accident. And unfortunately, the woman's face got really badly burned. Well, they rush her to the nearest emergency room, and as luck would have it, a world-famous plastic surgeon was visiting an old classmate of his who was working in that emergency room. And the surgeon looked and he said, you know, I can fix her. He said, but we have to perform the operation right now. It's a new technique. He said, we can't wait, right now. So they're looking for a skin donor. They find that the husband is a perfect model for the skin donor. So they take a big patch of skin off the back end of him and they fix her face. Well, now, when the bandages come off sometime later, she's more beautiful than she ever was before. Her skin is soft, and it positively glows. And you can imagine, this woman is absolutely delighted. Well, about a month later, they're sitting in the living room listening to some music, and she got very emotional. She said, oh, my darling, I love you so much that you would go through the pain of giving skin from your body so that my face could be repaired and look like this. I just don't know how to thank you. He said, think nothing of it, my dear. I get all the thanks I want every time I see your mother kiss you on the cheek. Now the nun is all cured, everything's fine. She's working at the hospital again. And she comes down to talk to a man who's been in for a while. She comes down and asks him if he can pay. She says, do you have any money? He said, no, I have no money. Well, do you have any health plan that will pay? He said, no, I don't have any health plan. Well, do you have any relatives who could pay? He said, well, I only have one sister, but she's a spinster and she's a nun. Well, the nun bristled. She said, nuns aren't spinsters. Your sister is married to God. He said, perfect, send the bill to my brother-in-law. Walking along and watching the golfers hit the ball, the wind's coming in off the sea, it's cold, their kilts are blowing up and like that, but they're golfing. Well, you know, that showed me right then and there that the Scots are a hardy lot, and many of them live long lives. Huh? Now, an 80-year-old Scot goes to his new doctor, his other doctor retired, and the new doctor gives him a physical. He says, well, I can't understand. He says, you're 80 years old, and you're in excellent condition. How do you keep so fit? He said, all I do is I play a round of golf every morning if I can. And then after that, I have a week that I'm a good Scotch whiskey, and that's all I do. He said, well, that's remarkable. He said, but perhaps it's genetic. He said, how old was your father when he died? He said, who said my dad is dead? He said, oh my goodness. He said, you're 80 and how old is your father? He says, 100 years old. And just this morning, we both played a round of golf. And then after that, we went to one of them girly bars to watch the lassies slide up and down the pole. He said, and that's all we had, a couple of drams, and that's all we do. The doctor said, well, that is truly remarkable, but it must be genetic. How old was your granddad when he did? Who said my granddad was dead? He's still alive. How old is he? He's 120 years old. He said, well, I suppose he went out golfing with you this morning too. He says, no, couldn't golf today, he's getting married this afternoon. The doctor said, why in the world would he want to get married? He said, who said he wanted to? Lying on her deathbed. And all of the nuns are trying to make her last hours on earth a little more comfortable. So one of them brings her a glass of warm milk and takes a sniff of it, and she rejects it. On her way back to the kitchen, the nun remembers that they have a bottle of good Irish whiskey. So she pours out half the milk and fills the glass to the brim with good Irish whiskey, brings it back and presents it to the Mother Superior, who took it and took a sniff, and she drank it all down to the very last drop. Well, all of the nuns were delighted that they were able to make her last few hours on earth more comfortable. And one of them said, Mother Superior, could you give us some words of wisdom before you leave this earth? The old woman raised herself, and with her last ounce of strength, she said, don't sell that cow. Oh, yes, now that we're in the South, let's talk about Zeb and Zeke over in Arkansas. They're sitting at one of them there fueling stations, putting gasoline in their pickup truck. And now they see this car pull in with license plates they've never seen before. So Zeb says, I wonder what the folks are from. He says, I'm going to go over and ask them. So he goes over, he comes back a few minutes later, and Zeke says, well, did they tell you where they're from? He said, I don't think they can speak English. Because I asked him where they was from, and he said, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Later that day, Zeb and Zeke are sitting in their trailer park having a few beers. Zeb says to Zeke, Zeke, now if and while you was away hunting, I went over, snuck over to your trailer, made love to your wife, and she became pregnant and had a baby, would that make us kinfolk? He scratched his head and thunk on it for a bit. He said, I don't rightly know, but it would make us even. The bartender being a robot, you ever hear of that? No. Well, it did happen down in Atlanta, Georgia. Fellow walks into the bar and he sees it's a robot serving the drinks. So he orders a martini, very dry. The robot brings it, puts it in front of him, takes a sip, perfect martini, best he's ever had. The robot says, excuse me, sir, what is your IQ? He said, oh, it's about 164. So the robot proceeded to talk about space travel and all of these esoteric things, and the guy couldn't believe it. So he leaves the bar, and I gotta go back and check again. So he goes and he sits on a different stool. The robot comes over and says, what do you have? He said, I'll have a martini, very dry. Sure enough, same thing, best martini he's ever had. And the robot says, well, excuse me, sir, what is your IQ? He said, it's 100. Well, the robot then proceeded to talk about baseball, football, and of course, NASCAR racing. Well, the guy left the bar and he said, I've got to try one more time. So he goes back in, chooses another stool, sits down. Same thing, you know, good martini. And the robot says, excuse me, sir, what's your IQ? He said, about 50. Robot leaned forward and said, did you all vote for Trump? A small village, way out in the country. Only a few houses and a one-room church. Now, it's a beautiful Sunday morning, and all the villagers are sitting in the pews talking about what their lives have been like last week and what their plans are for the week before, just waiting for the sermon to begin. When all of a sudden the devil appears before them. Well, they all jump up and run from the church, screaming in terror. All except for one little guy, sitting calmly in the pew, looking at Satan. Satan looks at him and says, do you know who I am? He said, yep, sure do. Aren't you afraid of me? Nope, sure ain't. Why not? Been married to your sister for 48 years. A young man is driving from Newfoundland to Toronto for a job interview. As he's going along the 401 near Kingston, he's pulled over for speeding. Well, now the officer takes all this information, goes back to the cruiser, and he's to writing it up. Now, with every minute that goes by, the young man is a little later to get to his interview. This is not good for him. And he's kind of steaming. Finally, the officer comes back, and as he's handing the speeding ticket through the window, the officer brushes away a fly that's bothering him. And Newfie says, I see you got them there circle flies here in Ontario. He said, you circle flies? What are those? He said, well, that's them there flies that flies around and around a horse's ass. He said, are you calling me a horse's ass? Oh, not me, sure, but you can't fool them flies. U.S. Navy. This is the captain of a U.S. Navy warship. Demand that you alter your course 15 degrees north to avoid collision. Over. Coast Guard. Repeat. Suggest you alter your course 15 degrees south to avoid collision. Over. U.S. Navy. This is the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS John F. Kennedy. My deck is full of fighter bombers, and I am accompanied by cruisers, destroyers, and other battle-ready vessels. Alter your course 15 degrees north, or I will take all necessary steps to ensure the safety of my ship. Coast Guard. This is a lighthouse, your call. He's going to do it. Absolutely no need to remind him to do it every 6 months. Now, a couple bought a beautiful old heritage home, and they tried the best they could to keep that place looking the way it used to, you know, keep it true to itself. But they were renovating a bathroom, and the woman had gone out, and she couldn't find a toilet seat to match the one that was there. So she asked her husband to paint it, and he said, I'll do it. 6 months later. Would you paint it? Yeah, I'll do it. 6 months later. Yeah, I'll do it. You know, that kind of thing. Finally, one day, it was really hot and steamy. She went out to do some shopping. He decided, today I'll do it. So he painted the seat. Then he had to go on a little errand, so he left. In the meantime, his wife came home, took all the groceries, put them on the kitchen counter, and decided to have a shower to freshen up. So she took off all her clothes, but before she stepped into the shower, she sat down on the seat. Well, he'd used some kind of epoxy paint or something. When she went to get up, she couldn't. No matter, couldn't get up. A few minutes later, he came home and he helped her. They just couldn't unglue her. So he reached underneath and he took off those bolts, you know, the ones that hold the seat down to the toilet. He took off the bolts, wrapped her in a sheet, put her in the car, rushed her down to the local emergency room. Well, now the doctor, he's looking at her, trying to figure out what he has to do to get her unglued. Now, I know you're all forming a mental image of this, aren't you? And he looks and of course, she's really embarrassed. He said, I don't imagine you've seen anything like this before. He said, well, ma'am, I've seen lots of them, but this is the first one I've ever seen that's been mounted and framed. There's a fella sitting in one of them food courts in the mall having his lunch. A teenager comes and sits at the next table. Now, we've all seen kids like this. He's got a spiked haircut like that, you know? And every spike's a different color, purple, red, yellow, blue. And on his belt buckle, he's got this great big buckle with a skull and crossbones, big belt, but it's barely holding his pants above his butt like that, see? And the old man couldn't help but stare at him. And he stared and stared and stared. Finally, the kid said, what's the matter, old man? Didn't you ever do anything foolish in your life? He said, yep. Got drunk one time and had sex with a peacock. Just wondering if you were my son. Now, later the man went to meet his son at the gym for their weekly workout. And after the workout, they had their shower and their dressing. And the man noticed up on the shelf of his son's locker this bottle with these big pills in it. He said, son, what are those pills? Son says, well, I'll tell you, Dad. He said the regular sized Viagra wasn't working for me anymore. So I went to the doctor and he got me this supersized. He said, but they're $50 a pill. The old man said, well, look, give me one of those and I'll pay you next week when we meet here again. So away they go. Next week they meet. The father hands the son a $50 bill and a $100 bill. And the son says, well, Dad, the pills are only $50 each. He said, yeah, but the $100 is from your mother. Northern Australia, a farmer had a small patch of land just outside of this small town. And on this land, there was a pond with fruit trees growing all about it. So one day he took a bucket, go down to gather some fruit. And when he got to the pond, he found 6 lovely young ladies skinny dipping in the pond. Well, they saw him and they shrieked, get out of here, we can't come out with you standing there watching. He said, well, I didn't come here to pry, really didn't. And he holds a bucket out, he says, all I came was to feed the alligator. then this one really fits. Then there was a fellow in Halifax who called his son, who's now living in Vancouver. And he said, son, I hate to tell you this, just 2 days before Christmas, but your mother and I are going to divorce. 50 years of misery's enough. We're sick of each other. We can't stand the sight of each other, and we are definitely divorcing. Call your sister in San Francisco and you tell her. So brother calls the sister. Well, she went ballistic. She said, no way they're going to divorce without talking it through. Leave it with me. She calls her father. She says, now listen, Dad, you will not divorce. You got to go talk it through with somebody. He said, I'll call my brother and we'll be there tomorrow. And don't you do a thing until we get there. Do you hear me? Okay. He hangs up the phone, talks to his wife. He said, it's all settled. They're coming home for Christmas and they're paying their own way. A couple had been married for many, many years. And as they got older, an odd thing happened. The wife began to shoplift. Well, one day at this grocery store, she was observed slipping a can of peaches into her purse. As she left the store, she was stopped. Now she's before the judge. And the judge says, well, how many peaches were in the can? Well, there were 6. He says, now I'm going to make an example of you. You're going to get 1 week in jail for every peach. At which point the husband said, Your Honor, he stole a can of peas too. Now, little old ladies are no slouches when it comes to snappy comebacks. A fellow retired. He went down to the government office to apply for his pensions. And the clerk asked him for proof of age. My goodness, he found that he'd left his wallet at home. And it was a hot, sticky day. And he said, well, I guess I'll have to walk home, get it, and come back. Well, the clerk took pity on him. She says, I'll tell you what, just unbutton your shirt. So he unbuttons his shirt, opens it up. She sees this silvery, curly hair. And she said, that's proof enough of age for me. And she put his application through. He goes home and he's telling his wife what happened. And his wife said, oh, that's great. What you should have done is opened your pants. You might have got a disability pension too. A couple had been married for over 50 years. And they then decided we better talk about the afterlife and see, you know. So they made an agreement that whichever one died first would come back and try to tell the other one about what it was like on the other side. Well, the husband died first. About a month and a half, 2 months later, she's sitting listening to music, and all of a sudden she hears a voice. Martha, are you there? Oh, yes, George. How are things on the other side? Oh, they're wonderful. We get to sleep for as long as we want. You know, and there's lots of food, as much as we want to eat. We get the run of the golf course all day. It's absolutely and to top it all off, there's lots of sex. She said, oh, you must be in heaven. He said, no, I'm a jackrabbit in Saskatchewan. That in their neighborhood, they had carts, you know, a peddler with a cart. And then people would come down and see what was in the cart. They would buy, mostly women. And the women would come down and they'd look at what, and nobody ever paid what he asked. They always bargained. One day his mother went down and she picked up this spoon and she said, this is a nice spoon. How much do you want for it? He said, 1 cent. She said, oh, I don't know. Think about it. Think about it. She's going to bargain for, he said, make me an offer. And the other one he told that I really liked, he said there were 5 kids in their family. They weren't wealthy. The father was just a working fellow. He said, but they always had enough to eat in the house, but never more than enough. But family pride actually dictated that when total strangers or friends came and dropped in just before dinner, pride demanded that you invite them to stay. Well, the minute that happened, he said all 5 of us kids knew that there wasn't going to be quite enough to eat for all of us. So the mother would call us into the kitchen, and she would say, now listen, I'm going to bring the chicken out, and you're going to say, what? We had chicken yesterday. We don't want chicken again. No more chicken. So that, surely enough, that's what happened. The mother brings out the chicken. What? We don't want chicken. We had chicken yesterday, blah, blah, blah. And then we figured, oh boy, at least we'll get some dessert. Now the mother brings out the dessert. Anybody who didn't eat their chicken don't get no dessert. That was the kind of humor that I liked very much. Here we go. Dear God, you made many, many poor people. I realize, of course, it's no shame to be poor, but it's no great honor either. So, what would have been so terrible if I had a small fortune? If I were a rich man, idle, digga-digga-diddle-diddle-dum. All day long I'd biddy-biddy-boo. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Idle-deedle-diddle, digga-digga-diddle-diddle-dum. If I were a bitty-bitty rich, yigga-yigga-diddle-diddle man, I'd build a big tall house with rooms by the dozen, right in the middle of the town. A fine tin roof with real wooden floors below. There could be one long staircase just going up, and one even longer going down. And one more leading nowhere just for show. Ha-ha. I'd fill my yard with chicks and 13 geese and ducks for the town to see and hear, squawking just as noisily as they can. And each whack would land like a trumpet on the ear, as if to say, here lives a wealthy man. I'll pick them up. Diddle-diddle, digga-digga-diddle-diddle-dum. If I were a bitty-bitty rich, yigga-digga-diddle-diddle man, I see my wife, my golden, looking like a rich man's wife with a proper double chin, supervising meals to her heart's delight. I see her putting on airs and strutting like a peacock. Hoi, hoi, what the happy hood she's in. Screaming at the servants day and night. The most important men in town will come to call on me. They will ask me to advise them, like Solomon the Wise. If you please, reptilian, pardon me, reptilian, posing problems that would cross a rabbi's eyes. Boy, 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 boy. And it won't make one bit of difference if I answer right or wrong. When you're rich, they think you really know. If I were rich, I'd have the time that I lack to sit in a synagogue and pray, and maybe have a seat on the eastern wall. And I'd discuss the holy books with the learned men 7 hours every day. That would be the sweetest thing of all. If I were a rich man, idle-deedle-diddle-digga-digga-diddle-diddle-dum. All day long I'd biddy-biddy-boom. If I were a wealthy man, ha! I wouldn't have to work hard. Idle fulfill some vast eternal plan. If I were a wealthy Life is not a journey to the grave with the objective of arriving in a pristine condition. Rather, it's to slide in sideways, thoroughly worn out, totally used up, loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride!" And we truly hope that we've contributed to your ride this afternoon. Thank you very much.